It has been a little while since we've read from the King of Ireland's son. So what's happening now is that Gilly is telling the unique tale, and the unique tale is about a girl named Sheen, whose brothers were turned into swans, and she is gathering the bog down to make shirts for them, to turn them back into men. And so she has been doing this. I think she's gotten 6 shirts made so far, and she has to make 7, I believe. And she, the Hunter King, has now taken her to his kingdom. And now Sheen was the wife of the Hunter King. She would have been happy if her husband's sisters had been kind, but they were jealous, and they made everything in the castle unfriendly to her. And often they talked before her brother, saying that Sheen was not noble at all, and that the reason she did not speak was because her language was a base one. They watched her when she went out to gather bog down in the daytime, and they watched her when she spun by herself at night. Sheen longed for the days and nights to pass, so that the last threads might be spun and woven, and the last stitches put in the 7th shirt. Then her brothers would be with her. She could tell the king about herself and silence the bad talk of his sisters, but as she neared the end of her task, she became more and more in dread. The threads were spun and woven for the 7th shirt. The cloth was made, and the first stitches were put in. Then Sheen's little son was born. The king was away at the time, gathering his men together at far parts of the kingdom, and he sent a message saying that Sheen and her baby were to be well-minded, and that his sisters were not to leave the chamber where she was until he returned. On the 3rd night, while Sheen was in her bed with her baby beside her, and while her sisters-in-law were in the room, a strange music was heard outside. It was played all round the king's house. Whoever heard it fell into a deep slumber. The kern that were on guard slept. The maids that were whispering together fell into a slumber. And a deep sleep came upon Sheen and her child, and on the 3 sisters-in-law who watched in the chamber. Then a gray wolf that had been seen outside sprang in through the window opening. He took Sheen's child in his mouth. He sprang back through the window opening and was seen about the place no more. Her sisters-in-law wakened while Sheen still slept. They went to tend it and found the child was gone. Then they were afraid of what their brother would do to them for letting this happen. They made a plot to clear themselves, and before Sheen wakened, they had killed a little beast and smeared its blood upon the pillows of the bed. When the king came into his wife's chamber, he saw his sisters on the ground, lamenting and tearing the hairs out of their heads. He went to where his wife was sleeping and saw blood upon her hands and upon the pillows. He turned on his sisters with his sword in his hand. They cried out that they could not have prevented the thing that had happened, that the queen had laid hands on the child, and having killed it, had thrown its body to the gray wolf that had been watching outside. And while they were speaking, Sheen awakened. She put out her arms, but her child was not beside her. She found blood upon the pillows. Then she heard her sisters-in-law accuse her to the king of having killed her child and flung its body to the gray wolf outside. She fell into a swoon, and when she came out of it, her mind was lost to her. The king knelt to her and begged her to tell him what had happened, but she only knew she was to say no word. Then he used to watch her, and he wondered why she cried no tear. On the 4th day after, she rose from her bed and searched the castle for a piece of cloth she had spun and woven out of the bog down. She found it and began to sew it for the 7th shirt. The king's sisters came to him and said, "The woman you brought here is of another race from ours. She has forgotten that a child was born to her, and that she killed it and flung its body to the gray wolf. She sits there now, just stitching a garment." The king went and saw her stitching and stitching, as if her life depended on each stitch she put into the cloth. He spoke to her, and she looked up, but did not speak. Then the king's heart was hardened. He took her and brought her outside to the gate of the castle. "Go back to the people you came from," said he, "for I cannot bear that you should be here and not speak to me of what has happened." Sheen knew she was being sent from the house he had brought her to. A bitter cry came from her. Then the stitched cloth that was in her hand became bogged down and was blown away on the breeze. When she saw this happen, she turned from the king's castle and ran through the woods, crying and crying. She went through the woods for many days, living on berries and the water of springs. At last she came to the Spey Woman's house. The Spey Woman was before the door, and she welcomed Sheen back. She gave her drinks made from the strange herbs, and in a season Sheen's mind and health came back to her, and she knew all that had happened. She thought she would win back her 7 brothers, and then, with their help, win back her child and her husband. But she knew she would have to gather the bog down, spin the threads, and weave them all over again, as her tears and cries had broken her task. She told her story to the Spey Woman. Then she went into silence again, gathering the bog down and spinning the thread. But when the first thread was spun, the memory of her child blew against her heart, and she cried tears down. The thread she had spun became bogged down and was blown away. For days she wept and wept. Then the Spey Woman said to her, "Commit the child you have lost to Dayachaba, that is, to destiny, and Dayachaba may bring it about that he shall be the one that will restore your 7 brothers to their human forms. And when you have committed your lost little son to Dayachaba, go back to your husband and tell him all you have lived through." Sheen, believing in the Spey Woman's wisdom, did what was told her. She made an image of her lost little son with leaves and left it on top of the house where it was blown away by the winds. Then she was ready to go back to her husband and tell him all that had happened in her life. But on the day she was bringing the last pitcher of water from the well, she met him on the path before her. "Do you remember that I carried you across the bog?" he said. "And do you remember that I followed your soul?" said she. These were the first words she ever spoke to him. They went back together to the Spey Woman's, and she told him all that had been in her life. He told her how his sisters had acknowledged that they had spoken falsely against her. He took her back to his own kingdom, and there, as king and queen, they still live. But the name she bears is not Sheen or Storm now. 2 sons were born to her, but her 7 brothers are still 7 wild geese, and the queen has found no trace of her firstborn son. But the Spey Woman has had a dream, and the dream has revealed to her this: the son that Sheen has lost is in the world, and if the maiden who will come to love him will give him 7 drops of her heart's blood, the queen's 7 brothers will regain their human forms. "So that is the unique tale," said the Old Woman of Beer. "If you ever find out what went before it and what comes after it, come back here and tell it to me. But I don't think you'll get the rest of it," said she, "seeing that the 2 of you weren't able to count the horns outside." She went on talking and talking, Gilly and the king's son hearing what she said when she spoke in a sudden high voice, and not hearing when she murmured on as if talking to the ashes, or to the pot, or to the corncrake, the cuckoo, or the swallow that were picking grains off the floor. "If you see Laheen the eagle again, or Blackfoot the elk, or the crow of Achil, tell them to come visit me sometime. I'm all alone here except for my swallow and cuckoo and corncrake. And mind you, great kings and princes used to come to see me." So she went on talking in low tones and in sudden high tones. "You must come with me and help me get to the rest of the unique tale," said the King of Ireland's son. "That I'll do," said Gilly of the Goatskin, "but I must get a name first. Old Mother," said he to the Old Woman of Beer, "you must now give me a name." "I'll give you a name," said the Old Woman of Beer, "but you must stand before me and strip off the goatskin that covers you." Gilly pulled at the strings, and the goatskin fell on the ground. The Old Woman of Beer nodded her head. "You have the stars on your breast that denote the son of a king," she said. "The son of a king? Me?" said Gilly of the Goatskin. "You have the stars on your breast," said the Old Woman of Beer. Gilly looked at himself and saw the 3 stars on his breast. "If I am the son of a king, I never knew it until now," he said. "You are the son of a king," said the old woman of beer, "and I will give you a name when you come back to me. But I want you, first of all, to find out what happened to the crystal egg." "The crystal egg?" said Gilly in great surprise. "The crystal egg indeed," said the old woman of beer. "You must know that it was stolen out of the nest of Laheen the eagle, and the creature that stole it was the crow of Achil. But what happened to the crystal egg after that, no one knows." "I myself had it after that," said Gilly, "and it was stolen from me by Rory the fox, and then it was put under a goose to hatch." "A goose to hatch the crystal egg after an eagle had half hatched it? Aye, to be sure, that's right," said the old woman of beer. "And now you must go and find out what happened to it. Go now, and when you come back, I will give you your name." "I will do that," said Gilly of the Goatskin. Then he turned to the king's son. 3 days before Midsummer's Day, meet me on the road to the town of the Red Castle, and I will go with you to find out what went before and what comes after the unique tale," he said. "I will meet you," said the King of Ireland's son. The 2 youths went to the table and ate slices of the unwasted loaf and drank draughts from the inexhaustible bottle. "I shall stay here to practice sword cuts and sword thrusts," said the king's son, "until 4 days before Midsummer's Day." The 2 youths went to the door. "7 waves of good luck to you, old woman of beer," said Gilly of the Goatskin. "May your double be slain and yourself remain," said the king's son. Then they went out together, but not along the same path did the 2 youths go.